All right. Welcome to our stamp club, and especially we missed them who are not able to join us today. And today's recording is going to be super, super informal. So hopefully it will be more of a discussion than you just having to listen to me drone on for a while. But I wanted to share a very, very fun card technique. And again, I want to especially thank Anne for introducing this technique. This is the original card that I made when Anne showed us how to do this. This was in a demonstrator meeting that we had a couple months ago. And this is called a Keyhole Easel card. And the keyhole, pretty obvious, is the hole that's in the front and in the back. And it stands up like an easel card. So it is so cool. And it has the, the opening all the way through, which is really impressive. And the fact that you have the same die cut on both sides. So it's one of those, I think, when you send it to somebody, and you probably do have to put, or what I would do is put a little kind of picture as far as, how to open it. But I would sit there for a while thinking, how in the world did she do that? So I'm hoping that the wow factor will continue as we go into this, but we're going to demystify this because it's really pretty straightforward and endless possibilities. And what I'm going to show you is a slightly different version of the card. The one that I'm going to replicate as far as the steps is the one on the right. This is one that I did yesterday on a Facebook Live, and I will post a video for this card and for this card. There are two little variances, and I will point them out later. I don't want to confuse what it is that we're doing, but this is the style that I'm going to do today. And one of the first differences that you're going to see when I bring back in the original is the orientation. So it becomes really apparent that you can make the card as a portrait, or you can make the card as a landscape. You could also do these with really any size card that you want. And I may try to do one in a slimline version because I think that would be just incredibly pretty. But again, they're very, very versatile. So I'm going to make one of these and kind of go step by step. And Anne and Belinda, I know you both have made these before. So at any point at all, if you want to jump in with any comments, please feel free to do that. So I am starting with a piece of cardstock that will end up being the base. I'm turning this completely open. And this part, the part that's on the bottom, is one piece of cardstock. And I chose to use cinnamon cider. I just love that color. And the dimensions for this is half a sheet regular cardstock, which means that it is 8.5 inches long by 5.5 inches wide. So just half a sheet of cardstock. Now, obviously, if you wanted to orient the card as a portrait, you're going to cut your half piece differently, but you're still going to end up with half a piece of cardstock. So it would be 4.25 by 11. But either way, you're going to start with half a piece of cardstock. So that's to start. Then I'm also going to make sure I have a quarter sheet of the same color. And a quarter sheet is 4.25 by 5.5. So essentially, it is exactly half the size of the sheet that we're going to use for the base. And these are the two pieces that work together to make that mechanism where you can see the keyhole, and you're also going to build your easel. And then I'm going to use some of the Blackberry Bliss Designer Series paper. I cried when I cut this.
Know that feeling.
Oh my word, it is just so pretty. And it is one of those that you look at it and you think it's just too gorgeous to do anything with, but you have to use it. You do. And for this piece, I cut this into a little bit, it's 5 inches by 3 3/4. And what that does is it gives you a really nice border of 1/4 of an inch all the way around. So again, this is 5 inches by 3 3/4. And you don't have to make this designer series paper piece that big. You can make it any size that you want. I would suggest that you do leave a border if you want to make it a little bit bigger, that you still leave a border around that single piece of cardstock so that you do have a contrast in the background. So we are going to start by building the front of the card. And Anita, I am very sorry to hear that.
Oh, no.
I hope everything is much better, and he is in my prayers right now.
Okay, I appreciate it, guys. I may have to go.
Okay,
I really wanted to do this card.
we are recording it, so do not worry. You take care of it. Priority is priority, and family is priority.
All right. I
Okay.
appreciate it, ladies.
Love you, lady.
Love you.
Praying, Anita.
Yeah, one of her sons is in an ambulance on the way to a hospital. So
Yeah.
Oh, no.
pray for her. That would him and her. That would be great.
Yes. Yes.
What do you mean? I must have missed that.
She just said that Chip is on the way to
To
the
the hospital.
Oh, no. Okay.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry to carry on with this. I know that's much more important, but we can all be praying prayers for him for sure.
Yes.
So the first thing that you want to do is you actually want to attach your designer series paper in the middle of your cardstock. But before you do that, let me just point out a couple things. One is that we are going to die cut in the middle of that piece. This is what the front is gonna end up being the front. So I'm making this piece right here, and it has a die cut in the middle. So you don't need to put glue in the middle. You're gonna have 2 extra pieces when you cut this out, and you may want to use them for different projects. So when you glue this piece, the DSP, onto the cardstock, what I would suggest is to go around kind of the edges. Make sure that you get some good coverage on there, but you don't need to mess around with putting glue in the middle. And then go ahead and put your paper on. Be kind to yourself. If you don't get it exactly in the center, it's fine. Let it go. Just let it go. It will be okay. All right. Now you have some choices. And those choices are what die you want to use to cut out your keyhole. And I'm going to bring back in the 2 examples that I've shown so far, because they show 2 very different sizes and shapes of dies. Since I'm doing the one on the right in a landscape, I don't have quite the depth for my die. So I'm going to use one that's a little more squatty. Over here, I had a lot more room for die, so I could use one that was tall. And you're also going to notice that on the left, the shape is really different. This is a basic, this is a nice label. But the one important thing that they both have in common is that they're symmetrical. So if you kind of visualize where we're going to be putting that fold, when we fold the die cut, it folds in half and it's the same shape. So in other words, if I look at the shape of the cut and I kind of just do half, folding it together, you're going to get the same shape. It's like a mirror image. So obviously a circle, you fold it in half, you get a semicircle. a square, you fold it in half, you get rectangles. So just make sure you have a shape that will allow itself to be cut in half, which is a crazy way to explain this, but we'll end up with the same shape. I'm going to be boring and use the circle again. And I'm using a couple sizes of circles. I just got these out because I want to show you a couple of different ways that you can use symmetrical circles on this card. The tiniest one will be the one for my sentiment. The bigger one I'm going to do something with in a second. So I'm going for this middle size. And all of those circles came from the Layering Circles die set, which is just a really useful set to have. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my best. Again, I'm not going to tell tales on myself. I am not going to get overly crazy about this because in the long run, it will not matter. But I'm going to try and center my die in the middle, vertically and horizontally on this paper. And I'm actually going to use a little bit of a Post-it note, and I put it on my platform that I'm going to run through my die machine. I'm just going to try and center that as best as I can, and letting it go. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this through. Now I'm going to run that through off camera. I know this is not the most exciting thing to watch when somebody is die cutting, so I'll put that back for a second. And depending upon the thickness of the designer series paper and the thickness of the cardstock, you may want to run your die through twice, up and back, just to be assured that when you take the piece out of your machine that you will have cut through both layers. Typically, pattern paper is a little bit thinner, so it's not going to cause a lot of issues. And what I like to do before I take that tape off, I'm just going to flip this over because I want to make sure that I can see the blade peeking through all the way around that die cut. The most aggravating thing is to believe you have something die cut and then you take it or you start to take it out, and lo and behold, you find out that nope, it didn't go all the way through. I'm going to go ahead and punch that out. And because I did not put glue in the middle, I have two pieces, two circles that I can use either later on this card, or I'm definitely going to save if I don't, because I can use them on another project. So that's the first die cut that we need to make. And let me bring this card back in because we're going to look at what we've done and what we still need to do. What we've done is that die cut on the front piece. We've done this part. Obviously, ignore the additional wreaths that I put on the top. Well, the other die cut that we need to do is going to be on our card base. And I'll show you how we're going to do that and also the measurements for the score lines. But essentially what I need to do is I need to put a circle die cut here. And I need to make sure that when I do that, that circle die cut is going to line up with the die cut that I just did. Okay. So let's first talk about the score lines that you need to do on your card base. And we're going to go ahead and do the die cutting. So here's my card base. This is the one that starts at 8.5 by 5.5. I need to fold it in half. So 8.5 inches. One of the score lines is going to be at 4.25. So at this point, it's like a regular old A2 card where I've got 4.25 on either side. Then the other score line that I need is I need to, from on the left side up to my score line, I need to score it at the halfway point. 4 1/4 divided by 2 is 2 1/8. So you're going to score at 2 1/8 as well. And what that is going to do is that is going to give you the fold on your easel. So you'll be able to puff that up. Don't do any burnishing on this yet. Leave it flat. It will be much easier to do what you need to do. Actually, I'm going to take that back because through this and I'm going to do it a little differently than I did the last one. So I just lied to you, but you'll forgive me. So I'm going to burnish just that one piece that's at the 2 1/8. And I'm going to fold that toward me. Go ahead and fold that and give that a nice burnish. All right. And that is going to end up being the part where we are going to attach the piece that we just die cut. So let me tell you what we're going to do. And I think it's pretty straightforward, but I'll tell you anyway. We are going to attach the piece that we just die cut onto the flap that I just folded. And then we're going to lay this flat and we're going to put our die back in here and we're going to run it through the die cutting machine. So one of the reasons that I just folded that back is I don't want to get glue on these two pieces. I don't want to glue those two pieces together. I want to make sure that I'm just putting glue on this bottom flap and I'm actually attaching this piece. So I'm going to fold that over and make sure that I'm just putting glue where I need to put the glue. And I'm going to orient it so that fold is, I'm looking at this piece and that fold is up at the top. And I'm going to go ahead and put some glue on there. And I'm going to glue pretty much on the side and the bottom, and then a little bit where I know that hole is not going to be. And even if I get a little bit of glue up above where the hole is, it's okay. It doesn't matter which orientation you have here. If you have a pattern piece of paper that, you know, has a pattern that's vertical, obviously you want to make sure that it's vertically. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue that piece right to the cardstock. So it's going to look like this. And I'm going to be able to lay that flat. And I've made sure by doing that that I'm not adding any glue up on here because I don't want any glue up on there. All right. I'm not going to worry about that glue because it's going to get cut off in just a second. And I'm going to bring my platform back. And I have kind of a jig here, I guess, if you want to call it that, where I know where that circle needs to be because I can see where the die cut circle is on the front. And if I take that same die that I just used, I put it right back into that hole. What you want to do is you want to press and try to move that around. It's like a puzzle piece. If you have it where it needs to be, it's not going to move around. It's like the blades have cut on that paper and it's just not going to move. And then you can take a little piece of either washi tape, if you get a lot of the tack off, or a Post-it note, whatever you just, you know, secure it a little bit more. And then again, I'm going to take this off camera. I'm going to put my other plate over the top. I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine. And on this one, you're going to definitely want to run this through a couple of times. You are running 2 layers of cardstock. You've got a lot of thickness. So be kind to your little die cutting machine. It may not be the happiest thing, but give it a little grace and I've gone back 2 times, and I'm gonna bring this out because I want to show you something. So I ran it through in one direction and I brought it back. And then, just like I told you before, what I like to do, I'm just taking this apart, and lift it up, and that is not quite cut all the way through. So one thing you can do that I like to do is I'm going to just flip over the sandwich that I used. So I am flipping over those top 2 plates, and I'm going to run it through again. And sometimes what I find is when I do that, that the blade works differently, right side up and upside down. And 99% of the time, it will cut through without any problem. So I'm just running that one more time, going back and forth. And you should be able to see once I've done that, that it is cutting all the way through. I'm just going to do that really quickly here. All right, let's see how we did. So yeah, I can see that that has cut all the way through, and that's a good thing.
I did not.
So I am just gonna pop that out. And I'm gonna have a little bit of glue on my die, but I'm okay with that. So here's what I ended up with, and I'll just clean that die up a little bit later. Now, let me interview, because one of the things that I showed on the video that I did yesterday was a little different method, because I've got actually 3 layers of cardstock going on in this card, and I'll show you a little trick and tip on that in a little bit. But there is another way. It's a different step that you can take. But what you will end up with, or should end up with, is something that looks like this. And then you can go ahead and bend your card, do that second burnishing. This is on that score line that's at 4 1/4. And at this point, you're going to have something that looks like this, where it's an easel card, but it's an easel card that has a hole. And that hole isn't just through that front layer, it's also through the card base. So when you open it up, it does a peekaboo-like thing all the way to the back. All right. And then the rest of the card is purely however you would like to do that. And there are infinite ways. One of the things that I am going to do, just because I want to have a little bit of a break in the pattern and the color, is I'm going to look at the inside of the card. I'm actually going to put a piece of white cardstock in the middle. I just want to break the color up a little bit. The reason is that when I go back in and finish putting the design together, and figure out how this is oriented. There we go. I'm going to use that extra circle from the designer series paper as the base on the inside. And I just think having a little bit of white between the busyness here and the border of the cinnamon cider kind of helps set it off a little bit different. If you are going to put anything in the middle of your card, this is an obvious statement. You want to do that first, because we're going to start building from the front after we put that down in the center, if you want to. And measurements that I've used on this are 5 by 3 1/4. So it's the same size that I used on the front. And again, you can use any size that you would want. And this is totally optional because you can obviously leave the cardstock the same color as it is on the outside, and the same thing on the inside. So I'm just going to take that piece that I'm going to put on the inside of the card and look at the border on the inside, the frame that's being created. And again, give myself some grace and just know as best as I can. All right. So let's talk about what things you may want to put in the middle and how we're going to kind of build it. And we've all made easel cards before or seen easel cards before. And part of what makes an easel card work is having a bumper and having something that is going to stop that piece from just sliding down. It needs to have a stopper or a bumper, which means that whatever you use for that probably needs to be raised up a little. And dimensionals are perfect for doing that. And I'm going to cheat essentially. I'm going to use that piece that came out when I die cut this, and I'm going to put it right back in here, and I'm going to pop it up with some dimensionals. Now, in some of the other cards that I've done with this, I did not do that. In this card, as an example, I used a piece of Blackberry Bliss, which is the same color, one of the colors in the designer series paper. And I cut that out. An obvious statement. Whatever you use as that bumper, you want to make it the exact same size as you did for the hole, because this is our keyhole. We're going to be filling in that keyhole with another piece of paper. So whatever you want to do, just make sure that you're putting it on, or you're cutting it with the same size that you did for that initial die cut. And it's easy if you use what you die cut out, because you already have it and you don't need to die cut anything else. And I'm just feeling lazy, so that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to put a couple of dimensionals around the edges, and then just like usual, I'm going to make sure that there's one in the middle so that it's sturdy when it stands up. And fill these off. This is funny. When I was doing the live yesterday, and I was talking about dimensionals and the fact that we all find these little pieces of paper everywhere, one of the ladies said that she found one in one of her dog's paws. I thought that was hysterical. Poor dog. So I'm going to, as best as I can, I think I'll actually stand up. I'm just going to look as straight down as I can and try to line this up like a puzzle piece. I hope I got it in the right orientation. And then just put it into the hole. And again, give yourself grace. It does not need to be perfect. What you will find is you're just going to need to kind of move this around. It may get a little stuck the first time that you do it, but the more you move it around, the more it's going to work. And now when you open up your card so far, you will see that you have a bumper. So your card is going to stand up on its own. And it also will still fold down and fit into a regular A2 envelope. I decided that I wanted to do a little bit more on this card, put a sentiment on and bring it up just a little bit. And this is where, again, there are infinite possibilities. The stamp set that I'm using is from the new mini catalog. And this is one that I really liked because it has so many different holidays and really fun stamps that can be used for anything really. You know, the stars can be used for new babies or graduation or congratulations. This swirl could be used for just about anything. And then eventually I'm going to add some wreaths, and they come from the seasonal swirls dies. And these are, they go with this stamp set. And what I really loved, and this is where the wreaths come from that I used, I love these wreaths. There's one that has the autumn leaves, one that has the Christmas, and then this one that has stars. And again, you could use that for anything. And they cut incredibly well. So I was super excited with these. And what I decided to do was a really simple sentiment. I wanted to use a couple of different colors. So I am bringing in some cinnamon cider because it obviously goes with the paper. And I'm just going to stamp this says, I'm thankful for you. And it's just a really pretty little center. Stamp that. And then there's a very fun stamp that has some leaves on it. And add those in rich raspberry. And that's another color that is in the design series. And I'm kind of placing these leaves so that when I die cut, and I'll be using a small circle to die cut the leaves, that it looks kind of like the leaves are coming from the die cut itself. So just a really pretty, I think, color combination and a very general but nice sentiment to use. And all I'm going to do is a circle die. This is a little bit smaller than the die that I've used to cut my hole. So I just made sure that that was a little bit smaller. I want that pretty kind of filigree to show around the outside. So I'm just going to take this and run that quickly through
A little bit smaller.
my die cutting machine here. And you know, you can do anything. You could have a different shape die, which would be really fun too in the middle of this design, because that would add just a uniqueness. You could also obviously just stamp directly onto the piece that you put in the middle of your keyhole, and that would look beautiful as well. You could not put a sentiment on this card, and you could put a sentiment on the inside and just put some really, really pretty embellishments on the outside and do whatever you want to dress it up. Just gonna pop that out. So I've got my sentiment. And I'm just going to, again, kind of do my best to get my sentiment in the middle of the circle. Not say bad things. Perfection is overrated, right? And I love the Tombow glue because we can move things around a little bit, settle down, and we still have a chance where we want it to go. No, I just think that's kind of pretty. I like the way the leaves are coming from the bottom right. And they look sort of organic coming out of that piece. Now, I happen to have a piece of the paper that I used when I was making another one of these cards. And what I may want to do, and this is just a cut, I think I'm going to cut using a larger circle. So this is why I said that I had pulled out 3 circles, because I wanted to see, maybe I could put another piece around that center and just pull it out a little. what's kind of fun is if you do that with designer series paper. Let me show you what I'm talking about. When I did this card, my hole left me a piece of designer series paper when I cut it out. Well, what I did is I actually, you can't see it here really well, but on that front piece, I cut a ring out of my designer series paper before I put it on the front of the card. And I can actually add that as a highlight around that center. And that, I think that just really looks nice. It really dresses that up quite a bit. So don't limit yourself when you're doing these die cuts. You can use your symmetrical, concentric die cuts to do some really fun things. So I will do that later. I don't want to bore you to tears by die cutting another piece and putting it around, but you see what I'm trying to get at. One thing I do want to show you before we kind of stop looking at this card is what I decided to do to kind of finish this off. And this card is exactly at the same place of the card that I was just doing, other than the front. These are from the seasonal swirls dies. They're the ones that I mentioned that have the really pretty autumn leaves. And I went back and I used some of the brushed metallic cardstock and I cut 2 reeds in 2 of the different, there are 3 different metallic colors, and I used 2 of those. I wanted a little bit of a contrast. And I cut 2 reeds that I thought would look really nice around the hole. And I'm going to go ahead and put those on. And I want to give you a little bit of a tip. If you use anything like this or any other design or embellishment that will go both inside and outside, whatever shape it is that you cut. And this is going to sound obvious, but bear with me anyway. I adhere this wreath, I want to be sure not to put any adhesive behind anything that is hanging over the middle. Because if I do and I push that down, the middle pieces are going to attach to the card. That's not what I want. So I need to be sure that the only place that I'm putting adhesive is going to be around the edges. And what that meant for me is when I put these leaves on, that I only put glue dots, is what I used, on the leaves that are on the outside of the circle, not the inside, just on the outside. So whatever you put as embellishments, pause before you do it and just make sure that when you're putting it on, that you're not going to impede on the folding and the easel. That I really wanted to put a couple of layers. So I put one of the lighter layers on the bottom. And then I came back and I put a darker layer, just offset it a little bit and put the darker layer right on the top. And this is what it ended up looking like. And it's, I think, really just pretty the way that that wreath pulls everything together. And it works really well. And it also, in my opinion, adds a little interest in the whole see-through part in the back. It's not just a plain, it's got some things going on in it. Let me bring back in the one that I showed yesterday and very quickly talk about the differences. And I'm not going to show you mechanically how to do the differences. They're on a separate video, and I think it would make sense. I don't want to be overly confusing, but what you're going to see, the one on the left is the one that I just did. The one on the right, take a look. There's a border. 2 frames that are on here. the frame that I put on the one on the right is built like this. So the hole is cut out of the middle. And that way you don't need to worry about the craziness of trying to line up the die cut.
Smart.
Take a look at the second video because it will really give you a little bit more information on how to do it. It's not mystical or magical. And the other thing is that the die cut, it's kind of hard to see, but where my thumbnail is where the die cut is. It doesn't go all the way to the inside. I actually made an inner circle. I wanted to really highlight the cinnamon cider. And then I use that inner circle, or can use that inner circle for another element of the design. So just a little different. And if you want a different twist on this, you may want to take a look at it. And I'll definitely do links for both of them. They're not that different, but there's enough of a difference that you want to take a peek. So I'm going to pause here. I'm going to do two things. I'm going to check and make sure that we're not about to get hit by lightning. I do hear thunder. And I also wanted to ask Anne, is there anything that I have lied about? Anything that I have forgotten?
No, I think it went very smooth, better than when I tried to explain it, but it's easy once you do the first one. Just to make sure that you cut your circles all the way through instead of having to make adjustments after you've put it together. So that's important.
And Anne, do you do anything in particular to make sure that that works?
Do what?
Are there any tricks or anything that you do to make sure that those, the die cuts go all the way through?
I added a piece of cardstock on top of the paper before I sandwiched it together. And so that gave it a little more strength.
Okay.
That seemed like it made it come out quicker than running it through a couple of times. Just take a piece of cardstock that, just something you're going to throw away, put on the top of it, then put your plate on top and run it through. And for me, it worked right each time. It would come all the way through.
Thank you for that. And again, thank you for introducing us to this technique. It's really cool. And the last thing I'll say is the one on the right, because I couldn't help myself. I put all of the brush metallic adhesive dots. I thought that I wanted a little bling when it was open as well. So I made sure that when I put those on and the card was closed, that those dots didn't get in the way of the wreath. And then when it was open, that they were in kind of a fun little orientation. And that's it. So I'm going to stop this recording and then we will swing back and see what you guys have been up to.